Welcome to this lecture on requirements analysis. In this lecture I will be talking about contextual inquiries and questionnaires. So in the human-centered design process, to get requirements, we can use contextual inquiries and questionnaires as a method. And we want to start with contextual inquiries. So here you see a workplace where there's production lines, where there's transportation, where there's packages and parcels. You can easily understand that there will be noise, there will be heavy work, there's different kind of processes going on, there might be different tasks. So it's probably pretty obvious already from that image that understanding, for example, a worker's task and maybe an assistive system or an information support he or she needs, it's not so easy to get from an interview. So to understand who are the users, how they work, who are they working with, in which kind of context is that happening, what is the timing, what is maybe also the burden of that work, that is something that you can probably only get out in a contextual inquiry. So you would, if the work or the situations allow it, actually accompany a person and try to understand what he or she is doing. So it's a little bit of looking over her shoulder, but it's also in the situation when you observe something, asking him or her what she is doing, ask her to reflect on what he or she is doing. So you have more or less a kind of an interactive observations. Users are interviewed in the context of where they usually use the device, the interface, the service, the task they do. So it's kind of considered as a trainee of the user. So, oh, how do I turn it on? Oh, what are you doing now? Why is this step necessary? Could be elements. You can have a person using an existing system, which you want to understand better in context. You could have a person in a later phase also trying out your prototype, and you accompany her and observe her, but you can also use the contextual inquiry to understand a certain activity and usage of an existing system or process. So it has elements of interviews, it has elements what is called thinking aloud, and elements of observation. So how do you run that? So you really have to go into the concrete workplace of the user, which is actually not necessarily all too easy, because you would have also the allowance of the user, the allowance of the company. You would have to have the agreement of other co-workers that it's okay to observe and accompany a person over a longer time. You would have to have conversation with the users, and you have to take in mind that, of course, this is kind of an interruption to the actual flow of use for the sake of better understanding the situation. What is a recommendation is that you partner with the users and really let them do what they currently do, their actions, their work, sort of guide the interview not always as a spectator, so what are you doing now, what are you doing now, but rather sort of guide it along what you observe and try to sort of follow it, the concrete workflow or the work practice. Try also to understand the background, so what is their motivation, what is their strategy in which they are working or using a system. So we can really expect deep insights from that. You would really understand the user's environment, the many tasks they have, maybe also the many distractions they have. They want to hear about the people they work with, what it means working with them. Maybe it's a very good sense of teamwork, or it might be very distracting because you are in a noisy environment. You could hear about the cultural influences, what are the policies in that working environment, what are the values that are there. So that is a very interesting insight that you can only go in the context of the current situation. Another element what you could use if you want to get requirements from users is that you do participatory design. So in an early phase, you do not sort of think of what individuals possibly could use and try to later on prototype and do usability studies, but to try to make designers and developers sort of to understand what are the user needs in integrating the user in very early phases. So I'm showing you an example which might help you to understand this better. So one of the research areas we have is social acceptability of body-worn cameras. So you see here two types of cameras. The first one is the Microsoft Sense camera, very early prototype. You wear it around your neck and it's taking pictures at several times a minute. And you might have privacy issues with that. On the other hand, if you see the second image, you see a person who is obviously visually impaired. You would probably say, well, if a person cannot see well, I would probably accept more the wearing of a camera, which has been studied in that research paper, rather than everybody wearing this. On the other hand, if you have to wear it, it could also stigmatize you that you are wearing this. And the question to explore how such cameras could be designed that they are socially acceptable has been studied with users in specific participatory design workshops. And to facilitate these, we have actually developed a method which is called privacy mediation cards. So as the discussion on privacy, on stigmatizing and other issues probably recurs every time, the cards actually laid the ground for the discussion. So the designers, the developers, researchers already had made several experiences on what could be the issue with the audience, what could be the issue with privacy. So the card set started, it was already the beginning, saying, well, we have a mutual basis of knowledge. For example, there would be a card saying, okay, if one person is standing close to the other one, what does it mean for the privacy? Who is actually the audience of that conversation with a social body-worn camera? So we really use this card in co-design workshops to get very early in the process input from the users, which is the requirements for that design, by already using a method that is facilitating interaction and is very quickly introducing participants to the same ground. And if you want to learn more about these cards, they are online available and are part of our research results. So what happens in these workshops is that the individuals are very quickly able to draw, to articulate, their suggestions on how cameras should design. Where could they be located? Should they be visible? Who is responsible? What could be the preferences? So you see just illustrations of these workshops. But it was like only 2 workshops that brought already deep insights into the question of how the privacy of the balance and the functionality should be well selected, if I should opt in or should opt out if someone is taking a camera and is taking pictures of me, if I should know by a status indicator that this camera is on and I'm sure that someone is taking pictures, or if it's shut off. So that was a very good means. So participatory design involving users already with their suggestions into a requirements and design phase was very helpful and is a very promising method. A very standard way of trying to get information is actually questionnaires in the requirements phase. So it is more or less a structured overview, and probably you as an individual have often already filled out questionnaires. So the goal is that you get information from participants. You might describe it as an interview. It can be run on paper and online. So it's a very commonly used method. It is also very often questions that are used for statistical analysis. And if you have many questionnaires filled out, this is of course an advantage that you can try to really find out that maybe 80% of your participants were in favor of 1 or 2 things. So they can include many types of questions, and there's even a whole field, which I cannot cover in that lecture, how to really make good questionnaires, ranging from the different types of questions you can ask, yeses or no checkboxes, Likert ratings, open questions, and also the question how to design good online questionnaires, which can be very efficient, but maybe not everyone can participate. And even more questions on how do you get participants, who is actually participating, and is the participation representative to what you are seeking for. So it's a whole field. but it is at some stages a very cost and time efficient system. It can be, if it's well designed and you have access to large samples, a very good outcome. You might be very flexible on what you ask, and if it's kind of very standardized, you are more or less, if you know how to design them and if you read the background on how to do good questionnaires, they are more or less free of errors. On the other side, you know, who is participant? Who can you get for that questionnaire? What is their motivation? Is there actually honesty, or are they really able to respond? Are they at some point only annoyed and just try to click at the end? What happens if people are not completing it? You know, who is not completing it? What does it mean? Does it say that those who do not respond have something interesting to say, but it's not ending up in your results? So again, be careful on what a questionnaire has on positive and also maybe critical elements.